People who like to explore abandoned buildings. What was the biggest screw this I'm out moment you had while exploring? Exploring an abandoned prison, part of the ceiling collapsed. It didn't hit me, but it was close enough to knock me over. I guess junkies used it as a place to shoot up because I fell on an odd needle. I got tested to make sure I didn't get anything from it, but it scared me enough to stay away from abandoned buildings to this day. Wow, I can't believe I have a place to tell this story. When I was in middle school, we went upstate in the summer. There was an abandoned house in the woods we explored. The floor was pretty pristine. The beds were made and drawers, closets, shut with stuff neatly arranged inside. There were beds. The lower you went, the more disordered. The basement garage was in complete disarray. Books and random crap thrown around. Beer cans and used condoms. We went to the far end of the house where the wall partially collapsed. And that's when we saw the beer. Footage ran with all our might. Thankfully, the house between us and beer's lack of interest is why I'm topping this. As kids, we would walk this 1/4 mile railway tunnel near where I grew up. There were no tracks, but it was next to 2 live tunnels, so there was a slight element of danger. That and the fact it was trespassing, I guess, and railway workmen, transport police, could catch us at any moment. So as you can imagine, it was dark, real dark, in the middle, but towards the end there was enough light to barely see. One day we took an old school pal down there, and after walking the length, almost at the end of the tunnel, just as it was beginning to get light, he stopped to look down a large uncovered square 3 feet by 3 feet manhole. No, he didn't fall in, but after a flash of brief confusion, he took in a deep breath and screamed, then immediately started sprinting for daylight. "Oh shit, run!" he screams. Naturally, without question, we ran, having a hard time catching him up. At the mouth of the tunnel, we stopped. All out of breath. "What the what's wrong? What did you see?" we asked. His face was pure white and shaking, barely able to speak. He said, "There was someone down there looking up at me." Now this body was, and still is, a good friend of mine, but back then he was known for not being the sharpest tool in the drawer. Instantly we had an idea what just happened, but slowly we returned to open manhole. Then, as the 4 of us stood around this hole looking down, sure enough, reflected in the still water about 5 feet down this fucking hole was our 4 faces looking back up at us. Exploring an abandoned manor with some friends, we had been drinking and smoking and thought it would be cool. The ground floor and terraces were covered with bricks, so we had to enter through the first floor, 8 feet high, using an improvised ladder made of old trash and wood pieces. It was quiet and stable and hard to climb, and we were 5 or 6 people. Being the only way out and knowing how slow it was, I was on edge the whole time. We were exploring the floor, cool glass ceiling, lots of debris, but suddenly we find a room filled with plastic containers with pink and brown liquids. Some friends decided to explore the ground floor, which was pitch black and involved going down a broken staircase missing several steps. They heard someone coughing in the dark and felt several people moving in the darkness as their eyes get used to it. At this point, I was hearing someone slowly walking in a room on the first floor, carefully stepping over the broken glass on the floor to not make noise, which was really creepy. We got the fuck away, and on our way out, we saw a roughed up man with bloodshot eyes living in a shack outside the house and staring at us. I'll still shiver when I remember his look. Probably just some junkies living there, but for a really high 15 years old, it was scary as I've been many places in the 3-state area and have experienced floors that are decaying. Once I almost fell, thankfully it was a very small drop. Needles, animal corpses, etc. One time at prison in New Jersey, I saw a cell that was decked out with a decorated dollhouse, and you could tell someone was staying there. The creepiest experience I've ever had was about 6 years ago. I was in an abandoned hospital in a residential part of New York City which had been abandoned less than a decade prior to our visit. Despite this, it was not a well-known location. We went at night and were exploring the 2nd, 3rd and 4th floors, all without issue and in total silence. There was little to no graffiti and everything was left. Patient records and tissue samples, medicines, medical equipment. As we reached the 4th floor, we passed a random room that said, "No explosive gases can be used in this room." I read the sound aloud and we immediately heard a huge thud coming from inside that exact room. My blood ran cold and I literally froze because I felt that someone in that room was making themselves known. We ran out of there and heard slamming doors as we went down all the stairs. I haven't been back there since, and it's now been sold and it's being renovated into a housing complex. I still wonder what would have happened if we went into the room. Found what looked like the remains of a pig and it was wearing lingerie. Okay, but this is a crazy story and maybe it would explain what you found. In my undergrad, I took a forensic anthropology class and our professor, later my graduate supervisor, told us a story of how they would bury pigs dressed in women's clothing and underwear to study how the clothing breaks down during the camp. After one such study, they just left the pigs in place and I guess forgot about them? I don't know. Anyways, the story goes that the location they used was just outside the city and was due to be developed into a shopping center. The developers found the pigs, said what the fuck, and called the police. Luckily, my prof is also the forensic anthropologist for the police and was able to explain things to them pretty quickly. Weird day for the contractors, I guess. There was a coffin, a real coffin. We were in an abandoned factory that some rich family had owned, and there was this one room with a bunch of personal stuff. Letters from the 50s, furniture, old photographs, clothes, even booze, like someone's home had been put in there. In the middle of it, a coffin, I swear. The room was gloomy. It was a late summer afternoon, no power and we didn't have flashlights. My friend was like, "We gotta open this coffin. We can leave unless we do. We gotta." And straight up lifted the lid. Sweet smell came from the darkness. When my grandmother died, I was the one to find the corpse and I remember that one quite well. So my heart skipped a couple of beats. The coffin was full of candles. They had a sweet smell. I mean, vampires have to keep their places smelling good too, right? Several years ago, a man was murdered in the city I was working in, and parts of his body were turning up at various locations. I think his hand and foot had been found and a week had passed. I'm an architectural designer. I was serving an abandoned chapel that was slated to be renovated into condos. It was apparent that homeless people had been squatting in the chapel, but I was sure how recently they had been there. When I went into the basement though, I was clear someone was either there or had just left based on the smell. There were no lights due to the power being cut, and I didn't stick around long enough to see if anyone was currently occupying the space. 2 days later, someone reported that they found the torso and head of the murdered man in a building attached to the chapel. I had been too freaked out by the smell in the basement to continue on to the attached building, but I'm almost certain I would have been the one to find the body. Was this in New Haven by any chance? Sounds like a similar case to one in that area. I do urban exploring quite frequently and nothing ever makes us leave instantly apart from dodgy floors or squatters. However, 5 years ago, me and a few friends explored a derelict farmhouse with outbuildings which had evidently been left for decades with the state it was in. After having a look around the place and finding nothing but empty buildings, we had a look inside what appeared to be an old stable. Inside was literally hundreds of empty tins of cat food, some nooses tied to a beam and a fairly new pair of scissors with a brownish crust covering the blades. The smell was putrid. We ventured further into the building and noticed on the floor was a cat's tail and a few cat's paws which had been dismembered and left on the floor. We swiftly exited and on our way out, a pickup pulled up onto the side of the farm, bearing in mind it was surrounded by woods and fields with no track leading to it. With 3 men stood in the bed. So say we got out of there as quick as you could and haven't seen or heard anything about it. The farm went on the market and sold earlier this year, so it would be interesting to see who previously owned it. I used to walk around an abandoned building near a forest which was initially a child hospital in the 70s, refugee housing in the 90s, and a language school for Chinese students till 2007. Since then, it's abandoned. The students left quite suddenly, so I found diaries, certificates, and even food. It was interesting since the place wasn't vandalized at the time. Once I was inside the building again, when I realized someone else was walking upstairs. I never left this place so fast, jumped over the gate, and headed to my car. When I reached there, a police car stopped in front of the building and the two officers jumped over the fence to enter the building. No idea what was there, but sometimes I wonder if I avoided more than just a report for trespassing. Found a bottle of some liquid in an abandoned drive-in theater building. Knocked it over and the concrete started smoking and we got nosebleeds instantly. Still no clue what it was, but we got the f*** out. There is a big abandoned factory near the center of our city that teens regularly visit. My friend was telling me a story about how she and a group of friends were walking around the ground floor. It was pitch black in places. When they saw a lone chair in the middle of a big room, they started joking about how it looked like the type of a place a kidnapper would tie a victim up, when in the distance they heard glass being smashed. They all took one look at each other, turned around and got the hell out of Dodge, scared it was someone trying to escape. Thanks a lot for watching and don't forget to watch other videos.